Hi, everyone. Gary Bronze here with the National Kidney Foundation on a snowy day here in the Northeast. It's my pleasure to welcome you to another edition of the National Kidney Foundation's Facebook Live series. Today we'll be discussing transplantation again, and specifically this time the organ donor list. My guests today include Dr. Shang Cheng Kung. Dr. Kung is a nephrologist, otherwise known as a kidney doctor, and he's also a professor of medicine at the University of California, San Francisco School of Medicine. Welcome, Dr. Kung.
Thank you, Gary.
We're also joined today by Dory Minch. Dory is a post-transplant social worker at a transplant center at Wake Forest Baptist Health in North Carolina. Hi, Dory.
Gary.
And last but not least, we're really lucky to have with us today Mr. Anthony Reed. Anthony's a transplant recipient, and he's graciously agreed to share his experience with us today. Hiya, Anthony. Can you hear us, Anthony?
Yes, I can.
Okay. All right. We got you. First of all, thanks so much, everybody, for joining me for this one. Anthony, I'm going to start it off with you. I want you to kind of set the stage for us here. I've heard your story, but I would love for you to just kind of share your experience with the folks that are watching regarding your transplant and especially your experience with the organ donor list. Do you mind doing that?
Yeah, I'll go into it. Everybody has a story, and I truly believe in that everybody has a very unique story to share. And my story starts out in 2013. I was diagnosed with end-stage renal disease, very unexpectedly. Did not realize I was even sick until I went into the ER because there was some things that were happening that I could feel it that something wasn't right. So once I got to the ER and they ended up taking my labs, they realized it was an end-stage renal disease and had to do dialysis pretty quickly. Throughout, doing dialysis, started dialysis within a few days, and then, that was a life. But one of the things that the nephrologist first talked to me about is he says, when you get you on dialysis, there are other options. He talked about some of the other options of dialysis, but he did mention transplant. He said, you're a young candidate, and I think that would be, something that definitely, once you get settled, would be definitely something to seriously consider. So not long after I started, I ended up getting referred to the local transplant center around where I live and went for the evaluation period. That went very well. And then it was hurry up and wait game. As a patient, you just want to, do we have a quick fix to this? Can we just, is dialysis going to fix it all?
Yeah.
If it doesn't, and you're in end-stage renal disease, meaning that the kidney's more than likely not going to come back, then we need to look at transplantation. So what ended up happening is I was sitting there, it's like, when can we get a kidney? After my referral, it goes, well, you got to wait. You're going to be put on a wait list. And, with us, it was on what blood type I was. I was an O positive and has a little bit longer wait time than most, just because it's a very popular blood type. We're the universal donor, so to speak, but we just can't take from anybody. We have to have an O type blood.
Right.
And they said it'd be about a 5 to 9 year wait. And one thing about the transplant is when you're on the list, you're waiting, they give you all the information, said, we've got your phone number, keep your phone on you. If we call you, that means, and say we got a donor, we need to be here within a certain amount of time. So for the first couple months, the phone would ring and I'd jump in, it would be the pharmacy or something else. I get this little high, so to speak, and all of a sudden it came down because I was really wanting the kidney. I wanted to move on with life. At 22 years old, you kind of want to get on with life. But, it's just one of those things that you just kind of have to wait a little bit sometimes. One thing that being on the list taught me was patience. I've heard it said, and it worked patience, and it truly did work patience. But within 4 years, I was able to get a transplant from a live donor. Somebody actually came to me and offered to donate their kidney to me. And they actually, what ended up happening is I ended up throwing my own birthday party and invited a bunch of people. And one of the people, this is pre-COVID days, obviously, but one of the individuals that came said they felt they wanted to donate. They knew they were O blood type and I was O blood type. Maybe it would work. And so within a few, within a few short days, they started that process of calling the transplant center, getting evaluated. And that process took a little bit of time. It started in August, and I got my transplant in April. So it took a little bit of time to get from point A to point B, but we were able to go to point B, and that was a very exciting day. That's the day that I stated that I graduated from dialysis to transplant. But, you know, it's very
I've
interesting.
heard that before, yeah.
Yeah. So that was a very exciting day for me. And then ever since then, it's been over 3.5 years that I've had my kidney transplant. So
Okay.
it's been very well.
Yeah, well, it's a quite inspirational story, and you know, I appreciate you sharing it with everybody. I'm going to go to you now, Dory, just real quick. If you could just kind of describe the list for people. Like I think in a lot of people's minds, there is this physical list somewhere that somebody is dealing with. Can you talk a little bit about the organ donor transplant list?
Yeah, so when an individual is evaluated and determined to be a good candidate for a transplant, so you meet all the criteria of your center, you are put on a list. And UNOS, the United Network of Organ Sharing, sort of runs this list. And they have, within that list, there's several different lists. And so you will be on a list that corresponds to your blood type, it corresponds to your region. The United States is broken up into different organ procurement organizations, and your transplant center will be in one of those organ procurement organizations. So when your name or when an organ becomes available in that area, it will be offered to the transplant center first. That's in that OPO is the acronym for it. And so if your name pops up in that OPO through UNOS at your transplant center, you will be given priority for that kidney, and your transplant center will call you with that. So within each OPO, in each blood group, your transplant center will have a list. And so UNOS will contact your transplant center and say, we have this kidney. And your transplant center will also sort of look at their internal list and say, oh, well, this person is this age and would be a good match for this kidney, or this person is this weight and would be a good match for this kidney. Some of it does have to do certainly with wait time. I know over here in North Carolina, they look at on average 3 to 5 years of a wait time. And that differs nationally, but it's important to remember that wait time, if you're already on dialysis, begins the day you start dialysis, regardless of whether or not you've been evaluated for a transplant yet. And so sometimes people are listed quickly or listed right out of the gate from dialysis, or it takes longer. And sometimes your listing date can get you transplanted very quickly if you've been on dialysis for a little while.
So the evaluation process, Dr. Kung, maybe you can answer this. How does the evaluation process work?
Well, it's a pretty long process, because even before patients physically make appearance at the transplant center, there's a whole lot of information that we have to acquire, because we need the information, insurance information, for example, and the referrals and so forth and so on. But once they made through with all the paperwork, and the patient will then be invited to come in for evaluation process, and it will be different from center to center. And I will describe. I've worked at different regions, different centers, but generally, at the minimum, they'll be meeting with one of the either surgeons or physicians, or maybe even both, and that will evaluate the medical side of suitability, whether somebody is a transplant candidate. And they will also be meeting with the social worker, and many times we'll be meeting with the transplant coordinator, who will then go through the type of things that we expect, because there are multiple aspects to transplant that we have to pay attention to. And it's not simply, and I usually describe to patients, not simply just a matter of undergoing a surgery, a 4-hour surgery, and have a kidney, and then life goes back to normal. We shake our hands and they merrily go on with their life. There's many, many aspects to this transplant, and I can see Dory and Anthony shaking and nodding their head. And this is why it requires a whole team to take care of patients. So it is quite a daunting process, and can be quite difficult for patients, I think.
So when people are waiting, what can they expect? Like what happens? And I open this up to anybody, really. Anthony, you have experience with this, right? You were told that you may have to wait a long, long time. That's got to be a scary proposition. And then, you know, what did you do? While you were waiting?
Well, it, first of all, I wasn't the most patient individual, so it did help me with that. But I learned a very important, valuable lesson, and it was this. I remember getting off the treatment one day and said, you know what? I do not have to do this dialysis treatment, this specific treatment again. That must mean I'm one dialysis treatment closer to getting a transplant. I was one day closer to being able to receive that gift of life. And a lot of times when you're waiting, a lot of times it really works on the mind, because your mind wants to say, well, I'm not going to get a transplant. Maybe something went wrong. Maybe, just a lot of different things. You could even think, well, maybe I'm just not meant to get a transplant. And entirely that's, not true generally. I think what Napoleon Hill said, bodes so well for this, is whatever the mind of man conceives and believes, the mind of man can achieve. And I had to conceive that I was going to get a transplant and believe it. But I also had to understand as well that I was going to have to wait just a little bit, a little bit of time. It's, good things come to those who wait. And
Yeah.
certainly that really helped me. And I would encourage anybody that's waiting on a transplant to really put their mind on the positive things. You're still here. You still have an opportunity to live life. As long as there's life and you're active on the transplant list, there's still hope. So I think that's a very good way to think about that when you're waiting on the transplant list.
I think we would all agree with that. Your optimism is infectious. And we were talking earlier about this global pandemic and kind of the reason we're all in these little boxes right now instead of all together in a room talking about this. And like you said earlier about COVID, every day is one day closer to the end. We don't know when that end will be, but we are one day closer. So I definitely appreciate that.
May I interrupt you? I'm sorry to do that.
Please,
I apologize.
please.
But I was just going to add on to, because I think one question came to me, and this is a question when many patients have asked me about the length of waiting time on the list once they've been accepted. Firstly, I want to explain to people, our audience who's listening out there, the reason why there's a waiting time and the reason why there's a variable waiting time, a different waiting time from region to region, is dependent on the availability of the organs, the seized organs, as well as the number of patients on the list. So from my own experience has been, and I'm sure you know this, is that on the coast, especially in the northeastern region of the country, as well as on the west coast, the waiting time can be anywhere from 7 to 10 years at this point. So even with the added dialysis time to the whole thing, our patients have to wait. Some patients end up waiting for 10 years. And now they are shorter waiting time, depending on different region of a country. And then we would actually encourage patients to try to get to a region with the shortest waiting time if possible. A lot of that is financially not a viable option for most people. So as a result, we would encourage patients to look for a living donor in order to actually get a transplant quickly. So I just want to explain that, I think.
So I'm sorry, Dory, go ahead, please.
I think too, what can you do while you're on the waiting list? One, you can keep yourself healthy. You can keep yourself physically and emotionally healthy. The healthier and stronger you are before your transplant, the faster your recovery is going to be after transplant. So whether that's taking time to exercise every day, and exercise looks different for everybody. So I'm not talking about going out and learning how to run a marathon while you're on dialysis. That might not be possible, but making sure you're walking or moving or engaging in some type of physical activity a couple times a week. Keeping yourself emotionally healthy, whether it's a mantra every day or engaging in some sort of emotional resource or counseling or support group. And then keeping yourself financially healthy. The more you can do to fundraise, to have a little nest egg to help after transplant so you don't feel so stressed about those things could be really helpful. But I think that the best thing that you can do, as Anthony is doing, is tell your story. Tell your story to people. I'm waiting for a kidney transplant. Oh, well, what's that like? Well, it's really frustrating to wait. Is there anything I can do to help? Well, you know what they said would really help? A living donor. So, a living donor would be the best thing for me. And it's just, you start the conversation about needing a living donor, throw yourself a birthday party, and who knows who's going to come up, with the ultimate birthday gift, right? But put it out on social media, put it on the back of your car, have somebody stand on the corner with a sign, walk through Disney World with your, phone number on the back of their shirt. And all of these things really help get donors. And if you can get a living donor, that gets you a transplant faster, and it takes one person off of the deceased donor list and moves that list up further. So you're not only helping yourself, but you're helping one more person get a deceased donor who maybe has no access to
Right.
a living.
Yeah, we talked a little bit earlier before we went live on the National Kidney Foundation has a program called The Big Ask, The Big Give. And it essentially gets people together and teaches people how to write that letter, how to ask. It's not an easy thing to do, but it starts with your community, and it may be your place of worship, it may be a school, it may be where you work. It may be having a birthday party, like you said, but the program, The Big Ask, The Big Give, is actually a great program. It's been very successful all over the country. And if people want more information on that program, you can just go to the National Kidney Foundation's website, which is kidney.org, and just type in Big Ask, Big Give, and you'll get more information about that. So
there's also there's a series, I believe it's this Sunday and next Sunday, that'll be online that you can access. I'm sure you can find it through kidney.org or the NKF Facebook page, where you can register for that and participate in that and hear about that too.
Thank you. So you mentioned, that we're really talking about living donation here. Dr. Kung, can you describe the difference between living donation and deceased donation, aside from the obvious? one comes from somebody who's living, and one comes from somebody that's gone.
Absolutely. I mean, from my perspective, working at a center where we have a very long waiting time, our bias or preference would be to try and encourage a living donor. But for many other reasons, a living donor kidney is also a better quality kidney and that's certainly bear up on data and statistics. And from thinking about it, it makes sense. Well, mostly living donor has to be very healthy to actually be qualified as a donor. And because they're extremely healthy, their kidney is actually of the best quality. And the living donor process is a controlled situation. So the surgery will take place when both parties, the donor and recipients, are ready. And it's a controlled environment. And maybe this is no big secret, I hope it's not to most people, that surgery that happens in the wee hours of the day tend to have more complications. It's just that you have operators and staff who's actually tired and so forth and so on. And this is a reality. So living donor will happen on the regular hours. It'll be scheduled. There's no surprises. And for those reasons, and there's no what we call cold ischemic time, because the kidney literally comes out and gets across the hallway to a second operating room, and it gets put back into the body. So we do not need to chill down the organs. We do not have to transport those. There's no delay in organs. So for all of those reasons, there's a better quality kidney, better outcome, and the kidney lasts longer. So, and for the obvious reasons that bypass the long waiting time the patient has to require on deceased donor waiting list. So that's why I started saying that I'm biased towards living donor kidney, and I would encourage people to try to do a living donor as much as possible if you have that option available to you.
Okay, thank you. I think in the instance of time, what I want to do now is take a look at some of the questions that the folks watching this have been asking. I'm going to remind people that if you do have questions on this subject, you can post them in the comments section. We'll do our best to answer as many as we can. In case we run out of time, well, we will run out of time eventually, but just know that all of the questions will be addressed on the National Kidney Foundation's Facebook page after the program. So let's take a look and see what folks are asking here. See what I've got. Okay, so here's a question. What has been the impact of COVID-19 on transplant evaluation? How has it impacted wait time? We talked a little bit about that earlier. Dr. Kung, you want to address that?
Sure. From talking from our experience, we have not held our deceased donor program. In fact, we carried on going. Now, I know some of the regions who had been impacted more adversely by the COVID, there was some hiatus in the transplant. Certainly our living donor program was put on hold for a very brief period of time. just because of safety reasons and things.
Right.
But our deceased donor program will continue at this point because all through the period, simply because their organs does become available, and it's a precious gift. When the family donates an organ, we do not want that organ to go to waste. So we continue doing kidney transplant, but it does means that we have to do more safeguard. We have to do it safely. Unfortunately, there are COVID transmission, to the transplant recipient, and there are potential donors who is also becoming positive, and I'm sure it's affecting region differently from different regions, and I'll be interested to hear Dory's experience at a different part of the country at this point.
Down in the Southeast, and certainly I know the Northeast had very different experience than we did. Our program did not stop transplanting. We did pause our living donor program. We did pause some evaluations as we sort of learned how we could more safely evaluate our patients. I don't know that it's impacted the length of time our patients have waited. In fact, we had our busiest month in May in our program history. And last year, I think we did close to 250 transplants. So we were certainly moving a lot of our patients through to transplant because some of the programs around us had paused. And I think every program did it in the way that they felt safe, but I know our program felt strongly that it was safer to get a transplant than stay on dialysis in a pandemic. Moving forward, we're going as full speed as our patients feel comfortable. If they don't feel comfortable coming in, we're trying to make accommodations with video visits, but there still are some in-person visits we have to do. And then still following up in the post clinic as needed.
Thank you. Here's another question that came in. It says, can I find out where I am on the list so I can get prepared for the call? Anthony, what was your experience with that? Well, you actually, maybe you didn't get a call because you had reached out to people to get your kidney, right?
Yeah, I mean, as far as checking out where I was on the list, the only thing I ever, really did was I'd call my transplant center every now and again and just checking in, seeing how things were going. Was I still active? Was there anything else I needed to do? That's what I did. As far as checking on the list, there was nothing I could check that I know of that would help with that. I mean, the thing is, it's like, be ready. That's all I can say. They told me when I walked to the clinic once everything, they said, be ready. Have a duffel bag full of clothes you want to take, phone charger, headphones, whatever you want. Just be ready. Be ready at a moment's notice. It's like ever ready.
Yeah.
So that's what I was shared with me. So, hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah. Does that sound right, Dr. Kung? Is there a way of finding out where you are on the list and what's going on?
Yeah. So we generally will give patients a rough range of time. And that's based on center's experience. So somebody who has a certain blood type and maybe depending on how, the word I use is sensitivity, meaning how much antibody they have in their system, and that meaning that what they're open to, the type of organs they can accept. So we give them a range of time. And the reason we give them a range of time is that the organ procurement agency, or roughly in brackets, organ banks, are being shared by multiple transplant programs, and each program has their own list. So whenever a kidney becomes available, it's not just available to a single program. So it's available to multiple programs, and many patients who may have a very similar waiting time and point system. So at any time, they may be available to people at any single organ. So it's very difficult for us to tell you that you are number 2 on the list, and therefore the next organ coming will be yours. And then if the next organ comes tomorrow night, you're gonna get it. So yeah. It's very difficult to predict in that way. So this is why we can only give a range of time. We'll say, for blood type O, for example, we know at our center it will be anywhere from 7+ years, but usually not beyond 9 years. So we'll say somewhere after 7 years, you should start mentally to get prepared and so forth. So, and I'll be interested to hear Dory's side of things, since it's a different region.
And the same thing, but it's important to know that the kidney that you receive is going to be a good kidney for you. They're not going to say, oh, well, you're next on the list, let's put this one in, when it doesn't match for size or antibody level. They're really going to give it to the person that is the best match. And so you may be on the list for 5 years and your neighbor's been on the list for 3 years, and a kidney becomes available, but your neighbor who's only been on for 3 years is a better match than you. your neighbor would get that kidney instead of you, even though you've been sitting there longer. And that can be really hard emotionally to cope with, but to know the better match of the kidney, the longer it's going to last for you. So you might have to spend an extra 6 months, but you're going to get, years out of that kidney because it matched better than the one that was available 6 months before. So it can be tough. And as Dr. Kung was saying, there's a lot of different factors that go into it, the sensitivity level, your age, your weight. They're going to match a kidney to what your life expectancy needs are, not just because that kidney becomes available to you.
Right. Well, we've got time for a couple more here. Here's a question, and Dory, I think I know your answer to this one because it came up in a program that we did a couple of weeks back. But this one says, should I go to multiple transplant centers?
Well, so there's a lot of things that are involved in going to multiple transplant centers. I know where I am, we have 4 transplant centers in our OPO. And even within each transplant center, we have different surgeons, we have different selection criteria, we have different specialties. So what one program may not feel comfortable accepting an organ for, another program may feel comfortable for. So absolutely, even within your own OPO, you can be multi-listed. Outside of your own OPO, you can be multi-listed, but you have to remember that you need to follow up at the transplant center that you're transplanted at. So it's not wise to try to get transplanted at a center that's 6 hours away if you can't follow up at that center that's six hours away. But certainly, whatever your distance is, see what's available in that area and get transplanted and get listed in that area.
Okay, thank you. So I've got time for one more question, and then while Dr. Kung is answering this question, Anthony, I want to just let you know I'm going to come back to you because I kind of want to just finish with, I think your story is so inspirational, and I just wanted to see if you have any words of wisdom for the folks that are watching. But this question came in, Dr. Kung. It says, what about pancreas kidney transplant?
So the pancreas transplant, well, firstly, you may say that very often we'll do kidney pancreas transplant at the same time, or we could do a kidney pancreas transplant by itself. But the only patients who are eligible, and well, this is a bit of a caveat, the patients who are eligible for pancreas transplants are usually people with type 1 diabetic, or what they used to call juvenile onset diabetes. And because the mechanism is different between type 1 and type 2 diabetes. Type 1 diabetes is essentially a pancreas failure, and then the patient will no longer excrete any insulin at all, and therefore they will benefit from a pancreas transplant, which will start to work. Type 2 diabetic in mechanism is mostly due to insulin resistance. So even if we do a pancreas transplant and the new pancreas is making insulin, it doesn't cure them of the diabetes. And this is why we do not transplant patients with type 2 diabetes, except in people who are very, very thin and type 2s, and who may benefit from that. So that's the only caveat. So this is why a very limited number of patients will be eligible for pancreas transplant. And traditionally, we have waited for the kidney to fail before doing kidney pancreas at the same time. And the reason for that is that it has the best result. The other reason is that once somebody is transplanted, and we didn't talk about this, and Anthony can share with us, is that patients have to be on anti-rejection medications. And these anti-rejection medications has a lot of side effects and infections and cancers and so forth and so on. So I think rather than transplant them very early and then put them on these anti-rejection medications, traditionally we have waited until they needed a kidney as well as a pancreas transplant at the same time. So I hope that partially answer the questions and not confuse more people.
Yeah. Well, listen, I'll remind people again at the end that you can always go to the NKF's website. We also have a toll-free call-in line. It's called NKF Cares, and it's 855 NKF Cares, and so folks will be available to answer questions beyond this program. Anthony, take us home. What do you want folks to know based on your experience?
First of all, I want to tell everybody out there, first of all, that you were born to succeed. when we were born in this world, we were born for one purpose, and that was to be a success. And sometimes challenges come in life, and it seems like it's an insurmountable mountain to try to climb, to even try to get over. But trust me, there is a peak, and be strong as you're traveling that. I was talking to somebody today, and we were talking about challenges in life. And I said, you know, a lot of times challenges come to us to make us better. It's kind of like gold. You know, the hotter gold gets, the more fine and purified and refined it gets. So that's one thought I'd like people to take home. You're facing a challenge. You're waiting on this kidney. You're waiting on your kidney. Think of it that way. Say, I'm waiting on my kidney, and my kidney is coming to me. It's there. It's almost there. I'm one day closer to this. I think that's, you know, that's encouraging. But also know this, that you are gold. You are getting stronger. This challenge, you're in this to make you stronger. And that's what I found out from my experience, that through this everything that I've been through, that no matter what, I have come out the better for. I say this a lot to a lot of people when I do speaking and things. It says, if one person, just one, you think about this, if one patient, one person, doesn't matter, and I have affected that individual in a positive way, gave them hope, whatever it may be, just one person, then it is worth every single step that I've had to take, from being diagnosed, from dialysis, every single stick, the hard times, the challenging times, the good times, the bad times. It doesn't matter. If one person's able to take that in the midst of thousands and millions of people out there, then I have come to do my job, and I've done it. So that's what I have to say.
I'd say you did it well today, Anthony. And unfortunately, we've run out of time. I could keep talking about this, but we do have to go. That said, in case we didn't get around to answering your questions on Facebook, you can check back on the NKF's Facebook page. We're going to be posting answers throughout the next day or two. So all the questions will be answered. I will let you know that. I want to thank our sponsor, CareDx, for their generous support in making this program possible. I would especially like to thank Dr. Cohn, Dory, and Anthony for joining us today and helping make sense of this difficult subject. Thank you so much, guys, for joining me today. I do really appreciate it. And now, on behalf of the National Kidney Foundation, as always, I'd like to wish you all good health.